What is up, YouTube? Casey here, and today I am doing my first law school related video. Currently, I am in the law school admissions process of decisions, but I would like to get a video out talking about how to get into law school with a low LSAT score. And low, I mean sub 160. So we're talking below 160, which is the criteria that my LSAT score fell within. I'm going to give exact LSAT score stuff about myself in a future video when I have all my decisions and stuff laid out. But while I'm still going through the decision process, I thought I'd do a video about getting into law school when you have a low LSAT score. If it's worth applying, what to do to supplement that, knowing that you're a splitter, and everything of the sorts. Getting into law school, an ABA accredited law school, which means that you can practice law outside of the state in which you pass the bar for, is not a small feat. I mean, even a low-ranking law school, it does take a lot of effort. This isn't to say that, going to a T14 school isn't worth trying. It absolutely is. But if you have a lower LSAT score, and like I did, and you've made multiple attempts on the LSAT, it does not define you, and there are other ways of getting into those higher-ranking schools. So we're going to get into that. Let's go ahead and move forward with this video. All right, so first things first, getting into a law school, an ABA accredited law school, a law school worthwhile, and like me, still getting a pretty hefty scholarship offer with a low LSAT score is completely doable if your undergraduate education withholds a high GPA. Now, depending on where you went to university, I wouldn't say where you went to university factors too much into the law school decision making. I've watched multiple videos and done some research of my own. When they pull your student profile for law school decisions and such, when the committee looks at you, they're mainly looking at your university's undergraduate average GPA and your field of study and of the sorts. So really, it just depends on your overall performance with your fellow classmates in that same undergraduate education that you have. So long as you have a very good GPA, you can offset a low LSAT score. And this is a known fact. You'll be known as a splitter to the law school admissions committee when they look at you for various law schools. As a splitter, what you're doing is saying, hey, I know how to get good grades, and I didn't do good on the standardized test. So what do you do with that, right? Well, the first thing I would say is you want to take the LSAT more than once if you get a low score. That goes without saying. Your first time to try, you may have anxiety, you may have, testing day nerves, you may not get a lot of sleep because you're psyched out. I have experienced all those things, and I took the LSAT 3 times. My first 2 times were online, actually, because they weren't offering it in person coming out of COVID. I had an awful experience both times. I won't get too much into it, but I highly recommend you go in person to take the LSAT. Taking it online, there's too many factors, and unless you can secure like a private room at a library and you take it like that, I would me personally, go take it in person. So take the LSAT more than once. That goes without saying. If on 2 tries you're still not scoring good and you're studying, you're truly studying, you're going to need to make sure that you have a high GPA. So for those of you who are thinking about going to law school, if you're going into college or you're currently in college, make sure you're going to come out with a high GPA, because that is going to offset the potential of you not doing good in the LSAT. And that's extremely important. If you have a low LSAT score and a low GPA, I'm sorry, but it's going to be a tough sale. Because you're not showing anything academic-wise of a redeeming quality of the sorts, right? If you can't do good on the LSAT and you can't do good in regular undergraduate education, what does that tell the committee? I'm sure you're a great student. I'm sure you could be a great lawyer, but again, you're selling yourself in these admissions to these admissions people. So it's incredibly important that you have a high GPA to offset a low LSAT score. And there are splitters that are vice versa, with a high LSAT and a low GPA. If you fall in that category, again, That's actually a bit better. Your LSAT score is the number one thing this committees value. Then your GPA and then everything else, right? So if you have a high LSAT and a low GPA, you're a splitter, but you're in a better circumstance than the rest of us who have, the other way around. But so overall, number one tip, have a high GPA. Extremely important. I'm sorry for those of you who are already done with your bachelor's degree, but for those who are currently in college or about to go in college, make sure you're getting A's, majoritively, and B's. I came out of UCLA with a 3.71 GPA, and that was enough for me to get a scholarship offer. I was below the 160s, so my high GPA, and it's not a super high GPA, but me having a higher GPA definitely factored into me being able to get that offer. Okay, so my second tip getting into law school with a low LSAT score is going to be a stellar extracurricular of the sorts or work history. These admissions committee people are going to be looking at hundreds to 1,000 of different applications depending on where you apply. And it's extremely important that you stand out. So how do you do that, right? I am actually of the vein that if you take a year off in between graduating from your undergraduate education and going into law school, like I did, you can make yourself look great on your application if you do something really cool. So me personally, I started up my own handyman business going into that year I took off. And that factored into me doing some entrepreneurial things. And I don't want to get too specific, but some really cool opportunities that I took with traveling with my other full-time job at In-N-Out allowed me to really show that I could work in a blue-collar field extraneous hours of the week while also balancing my education and coming out of my education and all of that. Allow yourself to possibly study really hard for the LSAT in that time like I did, but also do something that you wouldn't be able to do with being in school, right? Like that's my thing. I was able to take on some really cool work opportunities that weren't available to me when I was in school. And for anyone who does not skip any gap year, that doesn't take any gap years from kindergarten all the way up into your last year of college, you can do a lot in 1 year when you don't have school going on. So I would actually recommend for the splitters, if you're like me and you took the LSAT coming out of college and you had a low LSAT and you decided to take the year off, study some more and do some cool work opportunities, that actually would be in your favor. And you can explain that in your addendum for law school applications where you said, I took a year to really take on some cool opportunities to me that allowed me to do this. I discovered this. I found out this about me. I set myself up financially, or I learned, these skills that allowed me to take it into this field of work, and I want to go be a lawyer that correlate with this. I would highly recommend. Second factor that I'm saying here is take on a really cool opportunity to sell yourself by taking a year off. You're already going to be having a low LSAT score. Why not give yourself a breather and really, explore some opportunities? All right, my third tip / thing for getting into law school with a low LSAT score is to take the GRE instead. So the GRE is another standardized test that is widely accepted at most law schools, and it's becoming more widely accepted as time goes on. A lot of the Ivy Leagues accept it. Stanford takes it. Every UC law school takes it. So if the LSAT is a standardized test that tests your logical thinking, your logical reasoning, and you really have never studied for something like that. Like the reading composition itself, that section is something that, read, analyze, understand what you read and then answer questions about it. It's pretty self-explanatory in that regard that you learn all throughout your education in high school and such. But logical games, that's completely self-taught. You can't use any reference point of anything you've ever done to really understand that. And logical reasoning itself is another way of thinking and analyzing questions, and there's actually some formulas to breaking down those word problems. But the GRE tests you on math, English, and just basic subject matter that you've learned already. So if you're pretty well-rounded and you're up to date on your, college level, I don't know the difficulty level per se, but if you know you're still freshened up on your math, your English and such, and you rather just study for that type of test, absolutely go for that. I would say if you're like me and you just, no matter how many times you think you're going to stick the landing on the LSAT with your practice test, and then you get to the day of the test and you freeze up, and it's happened to me, consider the GRE. It was something I was going to turn towards. I ended up sticking with the LSAT, but my third tip here would be switch over to the GRE. All right, my fourth and final tip for getting into law schools with a low LSAT score is having a worthwhile addendum. An addendum is a supplemental document that you write that you can upload to any of your law school applications, in which you explain why there is a weaker part of your application that you'd like to explain why. That can be for your GPA, that can be for why you took a year or a few years off before applying to law school out of undergraduate, or it can be for having a low LSAT score. It has to be extremely short. I mean, it's not even a full page that you get to write. But in those few words, I would highly recommend, and this is a little bit of something that I feel like anyone can elaborate on this in a plethora of ways, but the tricky part is being able to articulate this point that I'm about to say in very few words. But it is that if you don't have a lot of experience with standardized testing, like me, I never took the SATs, never took a PSAT, never took the ACT, never really took much standardized testing in my life. If you get a low LSAT score, use your addendum to explain that the LSAT is pretty much your first attempt at trying standardized testing. And clearly, though you are not sufficient in getting the score that you wish you would have been able to get to meet the median of the school you're applying to, you do not believe that standardized testing in general is a reflection of you. You can make the argument in your addendum that as the country's moving forward, they're moving away from standardized testing, and you believe that the LSAT itself is not a reflection of you because you've never really attempted standardized testing, but instead, with a higher GPA, look to your GPA as a source of reflection of how you are as a student. And all of that is pretty much what I put in my addendum, and I think it worked for some law school decisions that I did get. But you got to articulate that in less than a page, right? But the main point of this point is use your addendum to emphasize that the LSAT is not a reflection of you. Whether that's a lack of any experience in standardized testing, your GPA being a better reflection of you, or whatever it may be. So yeah, those are my 4 things. How to get into law school with a low LSAT score. It's been done. You can read stories. People have gotten into the T14 with low scores. I'm not recommending that. It's incredibly difficult and incredibly rare, but you can still get into very good schools, solid schools. Time to talk about is it worth applying to law school outside of the T14 schools? If I ever do that video, yes it is. But you can apply to still some great schools outside of the T14 with a low LSAT score and get in. It is possible. So yeah, more law school related videos to come. Thank you for watching. This was a little bit long-winded, but I do think that these 4 main points are, a pretty solid advice. So, all right, till the next video.